So, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation With. As always, if you're joining us on the twitch.tv channel, thanks so much for joining us. Please do get involved in the chat, take part, ask any questions. Thanks so much, and don't forget to give the channel a follow because you'll get notified next time we go live with more content. Equally, if you are watching this on catch-up on YouTube, thanks again so much. It really is appreciated. If you could give the video a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be perfect. Thanks so much for coming along. Okay, so my guest this week on In Conversation With, well, he's a DevSecOps advocate. He's a Microsoft certified trainer. He's currently working in fintech and is a blogger. He's a community leader. He's recently launched the AZ Community Roundtable over on Twitter Spaces. You can catch him over there speaking with some fantastic guests on loads of different topics related to Azure. So, on that note, it gives me great pleasure to welcome my next guest on In Conversation With as Mr. James Cook. How you doing, James? Thanks for joining me.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me.
Oh, not at all. How you keeping? All good?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, keeping busy. Working from home, like most people in the UK still, but it's easing a little bit. And the journey to the office is happening now. So getting back to a little bit of a norm now. So
I think, yeah, it seems to be happening, doesn't it, across the board. I think I'm lucky in the sense that I'm not having to go out on the roads at all at the moment, which is pretty cool. But kids' sports is what's doing it for me. They've all started back up, so I'm zipping about the place. But yeah, it's all good. We got to keep going as we are, haven't we? So I mean, look. We had a chat just before we started this session, and there's loads of different bits and pieces we're going to talk through now. But before we get into all that fantastic stuff, I don't know if you want to give yourself a little bit of an introduction. Just let us know what you're up to at the moment, just for the viewers that might not know who you are.
Yes, brilliant. So I'm currently working in fintech, and my role involves working on hybrid environments, on-prem environments, and Azure. And over the last 18 to 24 months, I've built up my skills in Azure specifically. And over the last 3 to 4 months, I decided to set up a blog that has then transformed into a community show podcast on Twitter Spaces, bringing on people to discuss specifically Azure content. And I'm now working on creating video content, which is specifically on my journey on certifications, as well as tutorials on doing basically what I've been discussing on my blogs, just as visual aids on how to do things. So that's what I'm working on currently. But that's my journey.
No, and I was going to say we'll probably get into each of those elements at the moment, because I've seen how active you've been across the community recently, and it's some fantastic content you're putting out there. So, as always, we'll have a link to an article where we put all the links to your channels and your the AZ Roundtable and your Twitter feed and things like that. So we'll get all of those links in there so everybody can kind of get involved and follow you. But yeah, I mean, let's start this off then, James. I mean, in terms of tech, I understand you've worked for some major tech companies over the last sort of decade or so. I mean, I don't know if you want to. Let's start off there. Let's find out, how did you, what was your first kind of foot into the tech world? Where did you start from, and how's that journey gone over the last decade or so?
It's quite an interesting one. While I was in sixth form, I like some others, I struggled a little bit. I just didn't get the concept. I did a applied ICT course and just couldn't get the concept of the business side of IT. Mm-hmm. And my head teacher at the time decided to recommend me to actually don't go to university, take a gap year, and go to, which was about at the time, in its newest form, was an IT academy, which was supported by the UK government as an advanced apprenticeship. And the wording is a bit, it was very early stages, because we're talking about 13 years ago. And advanced apprenticeships don't exist anymore. It was a 5-month course where I just sat in a office building, and they literally talked to me about computer stuff, infrastructure, the basics in regards to what you would expect from a help desk point of view. So it'll and then I did my CompTIA Plus, and then I got my Microsoft certifications, and I did that all in 5 months, and it was really, really hard work. Yeah, in regards to it, it was really focused, and getting these ITIL certifications, level 3 certifications. So at the end of the 5 months, it was literally, now you can use that either to boost your grades to go to a better university, or use it to as an entry point into the IT industry. And my trainer at this IT academy decided to look for jobs for our class, and found one of the first jobs to find was a education job. And while I was doing my sixth form, I had the opportunity to shadow my on-site IT team and enjoyed doing it. So for the academy, they knew I had that little bit of experience. I enjoyed it, and decided said to me to apply for it. And this was the first IT job I applied for, and I was like, I'm not going to get it. They've reassured me that literally first attempts you won't get that far. And literally, I got an interview, and the interview stage was again, they prepare you to a certain degree, but I did a face-to-face interview, and once I'd done my face-to-face interview, they told me, now we're going to take you downstairs to do a technical assessment. And it was a whole different experience. They just laid out so much equipment, and basically they had all problems with it and told you to try and fix the problems. And one thing I hated at the time, and I still hate it from today, there was a printer issue. And I think that is one of the things with IT people, we just don't like printers, and it was just one of those things. It was the only thing that I felt very uncomfortable with, and it was the wrong driver installed, and it was a Windows XP workstation, and you didn't have permissions, you didn't have the drivers or anything, so you had to work out how to get them and stuff like that. And I was really early stage in my IT career. So, but funny enough, I got offered a full-time job as it was an IT technician role with the job title of technical consultant.
Yeah,
and that role involved me over the course of 2 to 3 years roaming around our county, which some people might know it as a district. So I was going around, going into education institutes like primary schools, secondary schools, and supporting either on-site teams of IT or IT staff, or no IT staff, where I'm supporting end users on sorting out their workstations and network devices. So that skilled me up throughout that over those 2 years. I had the opportunity as well to actually experience an email migration when I first started as well.
Cool. Yeah.
At that time, it was called Live at EDU, but it was actually Microsoft 365 as we know it now.
Yeah, so, I remember that.
Yeah, so I did. All the schools in that district was on a specific system. I came in and I was going around the county. I was having the opportunity to go onto service desk that the company had, and learning the basis of communication, and updating calls and everything, but actually going on site and actually seeing the other side of how things work. But I had the opportunity of working on an email migration of over 1,000 schools, which was hundreds of thousands of users. And it was and that was my first opportunity of actually seeing a infrastructure type migration. And what we see is nowadays is cloud. It was at its early stage, but from that I was able to use stuff like PowerShell, and that was the first time I experienced scripts. I used to use command prompt and everything, but nothing into the extent of using PowerShell to connect to a remote server, and then being able to experience moving users, getting information from stuff like that. So that was my first couple of years as in IT.
Well,
And then
that's to my ears and here, the journey you started off your career. That's very similar to how I started. And I think it's a really good grounding. How did you find that? I mean, do you still look back on those years when you started and you still relate to some of those experiences? I know I do, but how do you find it now? Do you think that was a good grounding for you, or do you wish you did it a different way? I mean, how do you view that now, James?
I view it a lot. I think it was the right decision at the time. Yeah, the path I always look back on is, should I have gone to university? Should I have not listened to my head teacher and gone to university, did my 3 years and come out with a degree? I was going to do computer forensics and go off and do a career in computer forensics, or was it the right decision and taking that initial grounding? And honestly, I think for me personally, I don't think I would have learned great enough to come out of university with what I needed in skill sets. Like I said, I struggled at school to understand the business side of IT. When I was doing my course, I couldn't. I understand the technical, and what was the case was, well, my way was the right way.
Sure.
And while then reading these business cases and not understanding that the customer wanted it in a specific way. And I think I would have gone to university with the same full process and would have gone into been a bit more delayed in my understanding when I came out of university. But going into a job and understanding from a school's perspective, which was massive, because every customer had a different point of view and used different technologies and different hardware and software. It was very eye-opening. Like, well, a customer's needs is different because of what they're trying to aim for and what their targets were, and that's something I really didn't understand before. And over those 2 to 3 years in that role, I gained that skill set and understood the need for understanding customers' targets over your preference in how you think things should be done.
I think that's a hugely valid point, James, and you see it. Obviously, I live in that world, on a daily basis with my job. But I think, to a lot of technical people, I suppose they come into the industry because they're passionate about the technology and they love the problem solving and into the nitty gritty. But yeah, I think certainly a lot of people I've spoken to over the years, forget sometimes that we're doing this for a reason. And, most of the time, the people that are paying your wages are a customer or the company that you work for, and they want something specific to happen to their infrastructure. And yeah, you're right. You can quite easily forget to research and dig into that business side, especially if you've never had a job outside of tech and it's maybe your first job in the business world is straight into tech. Some of those other skills with understanding the business side of things, the various departments that go into make up companies and how they all operate. And, a lot of the time I say to people, it's winning hearts and minds, in certain respects. If you have got a technological answer to a particular business problem, sometimes it's not just about you as a technical person just saying it in black and white. Sometimes you have to speak clearly and slowly and explain it to people that might not be as technical as you, that may be looking at it, like you say, from a different business perspective. So it's a massively valid point, I think, to call out to early doors, James, and it's a cool thing that you recognise that that's what you learned in your early career. I mean, where did it take you from there then, James? So you were doing that role for, what did you say, a couple of years?
I did it for 2 or 3 years. Yeah, and literally, there was then a massive shake-up in the public sector. Funding was being slashed in education services, and the county councils in the UK was deciding to stop chopping departments. IT services came under education services, and where I live in Hertfordshire, they decided to the department in education services decided to move away from county council with the support of county council to actually set up their own private organisation. So they set up their own private organisation, which was a not-for-profit, and it was we went out to all the schools in the whole county and asked for shares for them to pay a very small fee in a share, but it then became a school-ran company.
Right. Yeah.
So we ended up doing that. During that process, my role changed within the company, and I became a network consultant / account manager.
Mm-hmm.
And that was purely because at the end of my technical consultant role, I went to a customer site and started experiencing. They decided to go ahead and buy 2 crates worth of iPads.
Okay.
And
yeah.
for me, I went to site. I got chucked in the deep end and got told, "Can you try doing something with this?" And this was the first time we experienced iPads, and these were 2nd-gen iPads. And can you do something with them to make them manageable? Oh, okay. And at the time, there was nothing in cloud services that Apple designed that were anything that could manage devices. So I was chucked in deep and going, "Can you set something up? Here's a Mac Mini. Can you do something?" And I spent days on site, and the idea from the company was that this was going to be a thing in schools. We knew it at that stage because of it being touchscreen and affordable and desirable Apple products in education. So this was something that we wanted to invest time in. So over the course of those few days, and then after that, over the course of weeks and months, I started designing a system which we could plug in the devices and set them up, so that they're managed and restricted, and software applications can be installed via cable. And that's when I became a network consultant and account manager, and that I ended up leading for the first time after only a few years in IT, taking ownership of a project, and that was a completely different experience. I didn't feel like I owned the project. I had managers that dealt with the commercial side, dealing with pricing, marketing, and bits like that. But I dealt with the technical side. That was my first project that I led throughout my years in that role as network consultant and account manager. So I designed that system, documented it. It was the first time I documented something. It was like 100-something pages long. It was designed to be a dummy's guide to setting up the system, so that we could give to our technicians to go on site. Oh, here's your school's been given all these iPads. This is how to set it up.
Yeah. Okay.
Screenshots, step by step. You couldn't get wrong, because we, again, at the stage, we were talking to people that were coming into the company with Windows knowledge, like myself, and never experienced working with Apple products. They might have had an iPhone, but never in the mindset that that iPhone would be managed, that iPad would be managed. So it ended up being I owned that project technically, and while doing that, I was going out to schools and also supporting the Windows PCs, like I was doing as my IT technician role, but also started learning about network switching and wireless. So I was actually installing switches, replacing existing equipment, or buildings being built, and going on to had the opportunity to go onto a couple of construction sites and install network switches and Wi-Fi access points, and configuring that from a basic level, where there was no VLAN configures. It was just literally the default setup. Everything was open, and that's what you would usually get at primary school. And then we went to secondary schools, large campuses, where we set up multiple VLANs, based on blocks, based on departments. And that was a new experience for me. And even though I enjoyed it to an extent, I just didn't enjoy the networky type of side of it. But I did found that as a great learning experience for me. I ended up taking on account management at the same time. So I then took a handful of customers that we had, and worked with them on procurement and refreshing their equipment, and budgeting for system replacements, and working on architecture of how they should have their system. So we would say, yeah, but you're going to replace your servers, and this is at the time again, because a lot happened over these years of technology. We started introducing virtualization, and at the time when we were talking to the schools, they had like 3 or 4 servers in their cupboard. The schools are built, in a certain way. They didn't have server rooms, so they were in a small cupboard where all their exercise books are in and our supplies. So you just go in there, and you just have like 4 servers running. It's so noisy and so crowded with paperwork everywhere. So we were talking about like using Hyper-V or ESXi to replace multiple servers. And again, when we're talking to secondary schools where they had IT support, it was quite easy to explain that type of setup to them. But when we got to talking to primary schools where they're not that IT savvy to the extent at the time, when we're talking about virtualization, the concept didn't register. So talking to them about how these physical servers that are very high powered and very expensive, we're going to go onto virtualized little servers that are going to go onto one box, and try and explain that to them, and how that can be cost effective and how that didn't affect performance, because a lot of the time it was, well, I wanted a physical machine because it must affect the performance because all that workload is going on one. It's like, and trying to explain that. So that skill set was formed, communicating to customers about changing the way they thought with regards to technology, that physical went to virtual, and moving that and project managing that. So I learned project management skills, account management, talking to suppliers, budgeting. It was, again, that role, which was network design and account management. It was so much involved, plus taking up a new skill set, which was learning Apple stuff. I and my team worked with an Apple supplier, support professional, and working with them, communicating what we wanted and how we were doing stuff, and making sure that it was on par with what their standards were, to be able to then advise us when there were changes that were done by Apple, which you would only know at a like September or October release of new iPads are coming out. Of a new operating system, this is going to change, this is this, and you're like, okay, well, we're going to have to change this for our hundreds of our schools on how things were being done.
So this was all before we had things like Intune and endpoint management, things like that. This I mean, did you use any endpoint sort of device management platform at all, or was it all through the Mac Mini kind of pushing the config out?
It was funny. We were using Mac Minis, but we had schools that didn't want to spend money on a Mac because it was if it was just for one purpose, it wasn't the purpose that they needed. It was a cost saving to use the same tool which was on Macs at the time, which was called iPhone Configuration Utility. It was and because this was a Windows app designed by Apple, it was very, very bad. It was very designed, very basic. And you used to plug in your devices. I mean, you used to have this 16-bay dock, and you used to plug it in. And most of the time, not all 16 devices showed up. And you're working out which ones were missing. And so that was the fun of it. So we did that. And then it gradually moved on to more robust software, but it was all to do with Mac. That tool, the iPhone Configuration Utility on Windows, disappeared after a year or two. And we had to go around to schools and explain to them that they had to buy a physical device. We could have used our Macs. I used a MacBook at the time and gone on site and configured it. But the idea was that to bring down cost for schools, because again, every time we were talking to our customers, we had to think about the costs, because they had a budget by the government to supply IT services to their students. And the curriculum was the main focus, managing the devices, as long as they had something on the device to teach, but didn't care how it was managed. So our focus was to bring down the cost as much as possible. So the best way to do that was not to spend the time for me to be on site configuring the device. It was better to buy a Mac. So we had to convince these education institutes to buy Macs to be placed in the schools, and then we had our IT help desk remote onto them to then manage them. And because the Apple technology moved on, we started seeing Apple had Apple Server iOS, not iOS, Apple Server application, which goes on.
Yeah.
So they had something called Profile Manager, and we was able to wirelessly manage devices. And that was the first instance of having a web interface managing devices. And again, for the company, we were a Windows-based company experienced in Active Directory mostly as the interface, seeing a web interface. And it was quite an early stage web interface. It was very buggy. We used to not be able to always communicate to every device. And how many times we used to tell a school to plug in the device to re-enroll it into the system. But it was more cost effective for the customer.
Sure.
And for us, we trained up our help desk to be able to then do that. So it was.
How long ago was this, James? What year are you talking now? When this kind of 2010s, around about that sort of time?
It would have been. It would have been it would have been about 2011. Early 2011. Yeah, it would have been that.
I mean, it's just surprising, isn't it, when you look back at those technologies, and I like the way you're building this up in the terms that, we didn't have all of this cloud technology that we've got today for endpoint management, and this is how it was done back in the day. So, and it's cool to see how you've built up those skills over the years, and by doing all this, basically rolling your sleeves up and actually getting involved and doing it for yourself is what I'm picking up here, James. And it's you're bringing back some painful memories as well.
Yeah, it is. I think one of those things you have to roll up your sleeves, especially when you're speaking to your customers. And when we work in education, it's one of the things you got to know your customers really well. They're not the big CEOs or the CTOs that you don't see day in, day out here. When you used to go to these customer sites, you were having the meetings with these head teachers or the school governors or with the teachers themselves, and you're listening to their needs and their problems and their headaches they have in and out of the class. So you put in that extra effort, I found, and this is why I felt that missing university and going this path. This is the customer impact story. Really just brought me out to be able to go, I fully understand a customer's point of view to this extent. And the technology, they don't understand it to the extent that we knew it, but we didn't understand the curriculum side to how they know it. So for us to work as a team, and that's how we saw it. We're working with our customers as a unit and basically delivering to the students a high quality service. And and literally that's how the Apple stuff became. I moved my expertise. I was a Microsoft expert, well, Microsoft professional at the time, and I moved my expertise and focused majority of my time on Apple products and training people on how to use the hardware, the software, the management utilities. I even went ahead and decided with permission from the company to actually go and attain Apple certifications. And and I didn't, over those years, I literally didn't do any certifications. I did my initial ones at the academy and left and focused on that. But I decided, what I'll do is I'll get myself certified in Apple. It was very cool. It was getting more popular, and I was like, this is probably how we're going. Having devices that are designed for home users going to be managed using a enterprise tool, and that's how it was going to go in our company view, in my personal view. So got myself Apple certified as a support professional for Mac stuff. So it was and it was a different experience because it was the first time I had to go to London for work and get trained at a training center. And after doing that, I went back to the office and to the exam at the office with an exam invigilator. It was the first time I did a remote exam, but I was invigilated by someone physically in the room with me. So, yeah, it was
Yeah, that's pretty
it was
cool.
an
So
experience.
I mean, how long did you spend working with Apple products then, and how did this shift to where you are today come about then, James? Talk us through
Yeah,
that.
so but after the network and account management, I was promoted to a new department within our company, which was research and development in IT. The focus was technology was moving so quickly now, and so much new stuff was coming out. We needed a
Yeah.
research and development team, and it consisted of literally just IT technical architects. So I was promoted to technical architect with a couple of our colleagues who focused on specific technologies. So mine was Apple, and I had a couple other colleagues were Microsoft. Yeah, either through at the time it was email, which moved into the cloud backup service, which ended up in Azure, and it's just on-prem stuff. But at the time, in America, it started. There was a lot building up in regards to Google technology, and it was put on my plate. Going, here you go, James, because you're the person that did the unique technology thing with Apple. What's your thoughts on the Google stuff? And at the time, it was Google Apps. It was called, and Chromebooks, and that built up as well. So I ended up taking a technical lead on that. And we started offering services for that because it was more cost effective than Apple. And we built that up, and I ended up project managing that into schools. I did by the end of my technical architect tenure, which I did 4 years doing, I left with hundreds of schools, tens of thousands of Chromebooks being installed. I was it was the first time I became a Google certified trainer. I was going out in schools, talking to non-technical people how things were done, and just working on that. So, yeah, it was again another change. But the Apple stuff became a less of a priority for the company to a certain extent. So what happened was I was ended up not leading the project directly. I was more of the technical expert within the company, so I ended up leading the Google stuff instead. And then after all that, I decided to a change of industry. I was in education for 8 years. I decided that I wanted to work more technically with more technical minded people in a more technical role. And I was headhunted, and the job was very local to me. I was going around the county, spending a lot of my time in the car, and this new role came up, and it was literally 5 minutes down the road, literally 5 minutes, and it was an office-based job, and it was focused on working on-prem with the desire to look at cloud services and moving stuff to cloud services. And the company saw my skill sets in documentation, project management, and being able to change my skill set, my adaptability to technology changes. So I got offered the job and decided to build up my knowledge on their technology. And going from education to which is my role now, which is fintech, I thought it was going to be a massive change. I used to be told that enterprise versus education was a massive change, but I came in, and other than the difference between a corporate network and a production type environment for product services, that's the only thing I felt was a bit different, but I felt very comfortable. And that's where I started working on their on-premise applications, working with the development team, operational team. So my focus was infrastructure. So which was a change again, because I was a jack of all trades. I used to do everything. I used to do account management, architecture, and everything. So moving from doing that to being focused on one particular thing, which was infrastructure only, and not dealing with customers as much, it was a big change. And for me, I was like, I want to get my hands in something a little bit more. I need to keep myself more busy. And that's where it came to. The company decided to they wanted to go look at cloud services, and they were willing to invest in training.
Yeah.
And I decided I'll take that opportunity, and I'll be the initial one to just write out what I'm going to do in regards to Azure in certifications. And that got appraised and said, yep, okay, good. That looks like that's what we want to go as a company in regards to services. So your learning path seems correct. So that's when I started learning Azure. And that's when I did my fundamentals exam end of January. But before that, I did the MS Learn content.
Cool.
I played around with Azure, which I found very fundamental in learning.
I was going to ask, James, what did you do? How did you kind of take that first leap into learning, for the fundamentals of the AZ900 exam? Because, at the end of the day, we know that there's a lot of free services available within Azure, but I mean, what was your pathway? How did you manage to get a little bit hands-on with that?
Yeah, so with the MS Learn fundamentals, it was there weren't much hands-on in MS Learn at the time in regards to the fundamentals last January. It might have changed. I haven't gone through the content since, but at the time, it was a lot of video-based and text-based reading on the fundamentals. Yeah. And there was no virtual training days. This was, again, pre-pandemic. Any training, it was mostly either on MS Learn or you had to pay for a trainer to go to a training center or they to come to you.
Yeah, sure.
So for me, the MS Learn content was pretty much all I had, as well as the MS Docs. I was lucky to have the company signing up to a subscription. So I said to them, "Is it all right for me to play around with stuff in it?" Yeah, and they said, "Yeah, that's fine." But my nervousness was I don't want to create something with a massive bill. Yeah, so I said to him, "Is it all right just to put stuff on there? Do we care about how much we spend?" They said, "Well, it's not stupid amounts of money." So I was like, I don't know what stupid amounts of money is. I used to work in education.
which radio button do I click? Yeah, which button do I press? Does that cost me 16,000? And does that? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And again, because my knowledge was very basic at the time, I knew about Azure backup services from education services. But when I came in, the basic, the actually learning of other stuff, with that fundamental knowledge, I don't know what I'm creating. I don't understand the cost calculator. I was working out compute resources and everything, for virtual machine, but then you had to include network traffic, for bandwidth and everything. And this was going to myself, how do you work that out? Because I don't know how much I'm going to use in bandwidth. And it's like, and then all these warnings were coming up here because I'm like, I'll just allow the RD people. And it's like, wait a minute, well, about security. And you're like, okay, well, what do I do about security and stuff like that? So for me, for that ability to play with the company subscription was massive, and then being able to use MS Learn to represent that, and a lot of people don't get that at the moment. But what I found recently when I've been talking to friends and ex-colleagues and current colleagues, if you want to play around with stuff now, you do have the trial, and I didn't know about that at the time. And being able to use, I think it's 30 days or 90-day trial. To be able to set up resources and then use them on that subscription, that free trial subscription. So,
yeah, I think they flit, don't they? I get wind of free trials and things like that, and then they disappear, and then something else comes along. I mean, it's worth pointing out though that if you do work for a company, that you're starting your cloud journey, and that company happens to be a Microsoft partner, then hopefully they've got access. I think they've rebranded to the Visual Studio, My Visual Studio now. It used to be the old MSDN subscriptions where, I mean, we use them. You've got a certain amount of credit per month that you can kind of use to burn up. But yeah, I think I know there's a lot of free services that people can use, but to be honest, I don't know what the deal is with any free trials at the moment. I'm not sure what that is. Might be worth having a little look-see actually, because like I say, there's always certain things popping up and then they disappear, so I never stay on top of that because I always use this MSDN subscription for my kind of tinkering, but yeah, I mean, that's cool that you managed to get hold of that, and yeah, I think one of the questions I've had from a lot of people is literally that, and you kind of forget about these things when you're studying for exams, and especially if you've not you've not had either background that you've had, James, where you've come through the ranks, so to speak, and you've learned these skills over time, actually getting your hands dirty. If you're coming into this new and you're relying on MS Learn or Pluralsight or another course series, I don't know about you, but I forget. Yeah, actually, because you deal with Azure on a day-to-day basis, you're in and out the portal, you're spinning things up with CLI or PowerShell or templates and Terraform. You forget that. How do those people that are coming into this actually do that? And I know in some of the MS Learn stuff, there's some of those sandbox subscriptions, the concierge subscriptions, but you're doing a single task or a couple of little tasks. And I don't know about you, James, but I always felt when I've gone through them that all you're really doing is showing how to follow what they've told you to follow. And I'm not sure I get a lot out of that personally. I think it's just, I've run that bit of code. I might not have a clue what it meant. I can see stuff that's shown up in the portal. So, I think it's always a challenge, isn't it, if you're new into the industry, I guess. But look for an MSDN or my Visual Studio subscription if you can get hold of one.
Yeah, definitely.
But so you've kind of come through that, and that's where you're at the moment then. So you're currently working your way through helping the current employer move things into cloud services. I mean, how are you getting on with that? Because I've noticed you're doing a lot with DevOps recently. You're doing a lot of blog content around the DevOps and DevSecOps and things like that. How are you finding that at the moment, James?
Yeah, it's an interesting change from an infrastructure perspective, because when I started in the fundamentals Azure exam, I was in the mindset that all I'm doing is either doing it through the GUI or using PowerShell scripts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I started learning the administration bits. I was decided I was going to take that by a few months after doing my fundamentals. Yeah. But I ended up finding that actually the company needs were that we needed to make sure that we documented everything, but was able to redeploy the settings bit by bit and very quickly. We needed, if there was a down or a corruption or anything, or something went wrong, or we needed to redeploy something, or new services, it had to be done pretty much instantly. And using a change management system to then follow to reproduce your environment, it didn't sound logical. And what we found was, when I was doing an administration certification, I found a lot of talk about infrastructure as code. It was one of the talking points about using ARM templates. So I started learning about ARM templates, and then ended up going into HashiCorp Terraform. And it just opened my mind so much. And I'm not a code. I weren't anything in regards to coding. I struggled with learning languages at school. Struggled with learning English at school, and coding was always to one side, going, that's something that I would never pick up as a skill set, because I just ain't got the skill to be able to learn another language, and that's including coding. So when I started learning HashiCorp, I was like, this is going to be a very big struggle for me. I think this is going to be something that I'm going to have to learn a certain degree of it, and then hand it over to someone within the company to then focus on. But I pursued it, and again, practice was the main point. And again, HashiCorp was very focused on their documentation. There was no labs or anything. You can try it on your computer and run it, but a lot of their documentation at the time was Amazon Web Services. Their certification is based on knowledge of AWS. So I learned enough with HashiCorp, and I was like, I don't know what, I'll just take the exam. £69. I was like, just take it. But it was a lot of AWS. Give it a go. But it was a lot of AWS stuff, so I had to relate to it. So I took the certification, passed it first time. So I was like, oh, great, I passed that. But I've really derailed myself away from Azure administration. But for the company, from the company perspective, this is brilliant. We now have someone internally that knew how to do infrastructure as code and deploy resources using Azure DevOps in a repo and deploy infrastructure resources. And that there doesn't need to be as much technical documentation to the extent if you had a change management system, because it's all in code. so you could refer back to the code and review change requests, commits and everything, and have a wiki within Azure DevOps that could relate to some of the work, but it doesn't have to be in such detail yet to for each line to be explained, because you can comment that into to the code. So it was a mind opener for the company. It opened my views on coding, and that's how we started looking at redeploying some of our existing corporate stuff that we decided to put into the cloud at the time while I was learning Azure stuff, and redeploy some of that as code, utilizing how things were done. And like recently, I decided, oh wait a minute, we need to redeploy this resource, and all I did was I ran a Terraform destroy, and reapplied it, which then rebuilt everything back to how it was. And it was just as simple as a couple of clicks into the DevOps. But again, the DevOps side was a massive, again, from an infrastructure perspective, massive change on how we work in regards to how the practice. And when I heard DevOps for the first time, it was Azure DevOps. I thought it was just a product name, development operations. I didn't think about it being a practice. So I found out from one of my managers that actually it's a practice, and there's a book about it called the Phoenix Project. I read the book and enjoyed it so much, and I related to it so much as an infrastructure person that this sounds like where I used to work or currently work, and I'm like, this person, I can picture these people as other people. So I was like, so I can relate to this. I can see now the benefits of DevOps. I knew what DevOps was. I could relate to it. Now I want to implement that practice. So rather than just working on Azure DevOps, and doing stuff with infrastructure, I actually started, rather than just from the book, I started looking up the DevOps practices and everything, and started implementing that across our infrastructure projects that we had running at the time. Implementing that ethos, and then I picked up the sec in DevOps. I started then considering, well, we need to look at security in regards to everything, and that's when I ended up through that little bit of time, I did my Azure administration, which then went on to me because I was playing around with DevOps. I was like, I don't know what, I can quickly get a expert certification with Microsoft, because all I needed was the AZ 103, which is now the 104, and AZ 400 to get Azure DevOps expert engineer expert certification. I was like, okay, that seems quite interesting, just to go straight to an expert certification. And we had the Ignite event last summer, and they gave you a free voucher. They don't do that anymore. So I had the free voucher from just attending the Ignite event. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to do this DevOps exam. What I'll do is I'll do the MS Learn content again, and I learned more about development side of how things work, and how how static code, even including infrastructure as code, can be scanned for security reasons. Static code analysis, didn't know about that, something new to me, and literally started implementing that in my company for infrastructure as code. There's resources for Terraform and some stuff for PowerShell and ARM templates. So I implemented that in Azure DevOps and started scanning just code, but nothing that was even in Azure, but literally it's in the repo, scanning it and finding vulnerabilities before they go into a QA or production environment. Was again amazing. So it was that got then implemented, and literally it keeps on growing. It's just constantly
I agree. I think you find yourself in that zone where it's just a constant learning journey then, isn't it? So there's you mentioned it earlier, the fast pace of change of technology. You're constantly trying to stay on top of things and learning new things and new features and functionality. So I mean, I notice you're blogging a lot more at the moment, James. I mean, how's that going, and what kind of stuff are you covering in your blog?
So my blog is mostly covered. It was an idea of like a little, let's get into the Azure community. Let's give back, after taking so much off from them, from everybody. So I started writing very much DevOpsy stuff. So the first article I wrote was service principles. So I just wrote about how to actually tidy that up, how to make it a little bit more cleaner in your little spring cleaning in your little DevOps environment. And it's moved on from there. From what I've learned throughout the last 18 months, and just step by step, just a little explanation on how things work on services, just explaining it, and then how to implement something. I think my last post, which was a few weeks ago, because I've been working on other projects recently, but my last post was about Azure management groups, and that's something that I learned a little bit late, but easily fixable in our environments. But I didn't know why they existed. I didn't use the service. Found out later why it existed, and I decided, you know what, I'll explain that, what Azure management groups were and how I used it to implement management groups here in Azure. So my blog is mostly about Azure, but also using DevOps practices, or DevOps tools to manage your environments and everything. So I do talk a lot about Terraform, because I use Terraform quite a bit, but I am now looking at, with the blog, using it as whatever I learn, which I'm going to start. What was my latest post going to be? I've written it down. I can't remember what it is now.
You got a backlog. If you're anything like me, you end up with a backlog of in draft blog posts that you want to get to, and you never. Well, I never get back to them, but yeah.
So I've got So the project I actually have, it was using a Raspberry Pi at home to create a site-to-site VPN into Azure, and doing that all through infrastructure as code. So I haven't done that yet, but I'm actually going to use that, my learning experience, to document that and then share it with people. But again, it's the idea of this is also for me to learn. And I had a lot of comments from people saying, "Why didn't you do it this way?"
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know about that way. So
absolutely.
And that feedback is, I think a lot of people don't comment feedback, and I would rather people feedback if I'm doing something that can be done differently. So I found that quite useful. I've actually changed some of my environment configurations and services because of the feedback I got given and links to documentation that people are sharing, going, "Have you tried this? Have you tried that? What's your thoughts on this? What's your thoughts on that?" So that's what the blog has become more for me, to play with my projects, share my knowledge, but also to actually build up that skill set from, again, community feedback and then using that to utilize in my current role or for personal projects. So
yeah, absolutely. And there's no better way of doing it. Like you say, it's just, learning in public, I think, is one of those things. Like you say, you get so much back from it without you even realizing, just by those little nuggets of feedback from, people. And, I guess, people need to be realized, as long as you're keeping your comments in a positive manner and not just having a box. I've seen a bit of negativity going across social media and things like that. But, as long as people keep things in a positive mindset and everybody is there to help each other out, then it's a fantastic place to do this kind of work. And, I'm sure you agree, James.
Yeah, definitely.
I think we're both doing the same thing. So, I mean, that's cool. I mean, it's been really interesting journey to understand where you've come from, what you've been through over the last few years, where you're going. I mean, in terms of your DevOps journey, like you say, you're still on that journey now, and you're learning things on a daily basis, as we all are currently with all the tech that's flying around there. I mean, moving on to the other parts of your social kind of respect and what you're giving back to the community. I noticed a few weeks back you set up a new podcast, the AZ Community Roundtable. And you're using Twitter Spaces primarily for that at the moment, I think, aren't you? I mean, how's that going? Let us know a little bit about that, if you can, James.
Yeah, it came to my attention when Twitter awarded me the Twitter Spaces early access on iOS, and I was like, this is actually a good idea, because I spent a lot. Once I started doing all the community content and talking to people, following them on Twitter, I spent a lot of my time on Twitter. My wife tells me I spend too much time on Twitter. when this came about, I went to myself, you know what, it'd be such a good idea if someone did an Azure podcast live through Twitter, because I was like, oh, I would join, and I was joining at the time when it did come out. Just here and there, Twitter Spaces, from other people about dev or stuff like that. Nothing specific to Azure.
Yeah.
So it became clear that we need. Let's see what people thoughts were. So I was like, and I put it out on a tweet going, "What's everybody's thoughts on here?" And it got a massive response within 24 hours from loads of people, from even employees at Microsoft, which was a shock to me because, I create content for Azure and I think, my relationship with Microsoft, it's literally either from when they've recommended my blog post in their dev community weekly post. That's the only interaction I had with anyone from Microsoft. So for people from Microsoft, for employees from Microsoft saying, this is a brilliant idea. You should do it. I would definitely do something like that. I just put out the idea. I didn't think of me actually hosting it. I was thinking, someone would just take the idea and run with it. So that was like the beginning of the end of the week, working week. And I decided that weekend, I'll create the Twitter account, think of the name, create a Twitter account, do some images on my iPad, using a free app. And then after the weekend, I just went out and said to people, there's the Twitter account. This is the logo. Who wants to actually be on the first few shows?
Yeah.
And again, those people that commented, and said, they would definitely do it. I ended up putting it up, the schedule for the first 4 shows. And I had a great list of people that came along and said, I'll do this day, do this day, do this day. And with the first show was meant to be this week, which obviously whenever this video came out, it might have been way before that. But because of circumstances, I couldn't do the third show this week. So it's now going to be rearranged, hopefully next week. These things do happen. So we're going to do the first show, and then we've got it's been every fortnight.
Okay.
So we've got the 4th show coming after that, and I know who they are. And I'll be in contact with those people. But after the 4 shows, there's no actual schedule. The idea was to do the 4 shows and then get feedback from those people that spoke on it and look at, was the schedule, was the format correct? Is the schedule correct? How should we do this? How do we do that? I've learned personally a lot from it already. As a host, like you probably have experienced, you can get very involved in your technical stuff and not focus on other aspects. And I found like the first show, I overdid it. Twitter Spaces do not hold a recording function at the moment. So I was like, I need to get this recorded. Okay, how can I get this recorded? My iPhone won't let me record it if I'm trying to talk. So it keeps on disconnecting me. So I learned all this stuff. So I ended up using my computer to record it. Then I had loads of technical issues at the beginning. So I had to sort that out. But then
it's a new skill set that you learn. I know what you mean.
And I dived in very, very quickly with all the stuff, because I wanted it recorded there. I wanted it on YouTube. I wanted it on podcast platforms like Spotify and everything. So I was like, not everyone can listen to this live, and because Twitter doesn't offer a playback option, I wanted this on these platforms so people can listen. So the first show, all I could hear myself doing is erring, because I was focusing on the content, focusing on the technical stuff, speaking about my stuff, but then keep going back to it. So then I'm thinking about things that are going wrong and not actually focusing on the speakers and their content to that extent. So I learned from the first show. The second show, I was more prepared. I had technical issues on the second show. My microphone weren't working. So my whole setup for recording weren't working. So I had to fix that with it. And we started 5 minutes late. So these are all the things that I ended up learning. And this was great, because what I was also doing is putting this on my blog and sharing it with people, my experience, what I'm learning as a person in this journey in hosting, which I'm not used to doing. I'm okay with writing stuff because that's always what I've done. I'm used to training in person. When I'm looking at the person and talking to them, but actually sitting at a screen, talking to these little icons that are just highlighting when they're talking, it was completely different. And one of the things, it's like YouTube videos. when I try doing that, I just don't get the hang of talking to myself. And this is something, about another new skill set that I was trying to do. So the AZ Community Roundtable, the idea is, once the 4th show's over, we're going to see what the scheduling is going to be like. I wanted more people involved, but again, because I want to record it, I need their permission. And again, Twitter doesn't offer the ability for people to accept a waiver to say, that we can use your your voice elsewhere. So everybody that's showed up on the show have signed a little waiver saying, I can, other than Twitter Spaces, I can put this on to Spotify and YouTube and so on and so forth. So all these people have done that. But so we're going to look. So I'm going to end up looking at how we move forward with this. And I think this is everyone's feedback is this is brilliant because it's such a relaxed conversation where they're thinking of a topic they want to talk about, but then they just come in and then just talking about what their experience has been or their thoughts or questions they have. And we then discuss it. And I've had the opportunity to have a couple of people from Microsoft come along and talk. And they talked about their stuff. And I've had people like Rishab, who's been on your show, where he's talked about his certification journey. And we had someone from Microsoft on there, who's talked about who was intrigued in it and how it was. And we were just talking about our thoughts about it, and it was just very relaxed. It's not scripted or anything, so it was really good in that context. So we want to keep it in that format. I would like in a larger audience. I would like it so that after the speakers talk, I want to bring on someone who's listening to ask a question or comment. But that's something that hopefully we can move on to with the development of Twitter Spaces, or with using additional tool sets or moving to a different platform. I don't think I want to move from Twitter Spaces, but there are more platforms that are coming out with live shows. Facebook's done it, Spotify's just done it with green screen, I think they called it. So they're all coming out with this ability now to do a live show podcast, and it's trying to find the right platform for the right community for us to do. I think it's Twitter, but I need to wait for Twitter to do a bit more development so that I can then accommodate let's bring someone in from the audience to say something, and then I can record them because I'm allowed to do that because Twitter's had a little disclaimer to say that audio will be recorded. So I'm with you. I think it's one of those things. It's like anything, isn't it? I think it's that consistency and that keep going, because I think anything technical, I'm sure most people would agree, unless you're doing something, I don't know, you've got the next big thing and all of a sudden you blow up completely and you've got that audience there within a few shows. I don't think that's the way it works. I think it's a slow burning process where you're doing it, I guess, to learn those, like you say, you're learning those skills and you're growing it. And I think, I think I joined a conversation on Clubhouse, is another one of those platforms a few weeks back. And there seems to be a few springing up at the moment. But I mean, we can reach you on the Twitter tag is at AZ Roundtable, isn't it? Yeah, so we'll stick the link in the link below. I'm going to put a massive link in there so everybody can reach it. So I mean, it's been fantastic, this conversation, James. It's been really intriguing, insightful, and you've guided us through your career and where you are at the moment and how you're staying on top and how you're using your blog, which is absolutely brilliant to see. I mean, before we wrap this episode up, there's always one question I like to ask the guests that come on this show. Right, what's next? Where are we headed, James, in your opinion? Where are we going and what's next for us all in terms of technology? I think it's AI, 100%. Yeah, I did an AI 900 course, did a little bit of training on that, and I'm seeing it everywhere. We just announced yesterday, which is obviously whenever this video has come out, but the GitHub have now brought out a new tool, which is Copilot.
Copilot, yeah, I saw that.
That's it.
It's pretty cool, doesn't it?
And it looks amazing. And again, that's built on AI. And a lot of tool sets are coming out that way. And I'm thinking the move is going to be, you can start seeing a lot of these infrastructure services, going to have this AI integrated in some way or form. Even if you don't know about it, it's going to be AI driven in some in some way. So I think, that's an area that people should learn the basics about, if I can, or learning Azure, because you're going to see it popping up more over the next 12 months at least. So
I completely agree. I think you're right. I think that's certainly how I'm seeing the world as well. There seems to be a lot of traction with AI, machine learning, IoT, all of that good stuff. So I think I concur with your view of the world at the moment then, James. But it's been brilliant. I mean, before we wrap this up, are there any other nuggets of information you want to drop our way, or should we wrap up the call?
I think we should wrap up here. I think it was brilliant. Thank you for having me.
No, not at all. It's been fantastic. Really good. Well, good luck with Community Roundtable. Obviously, keep going with the blogs. I'll always like and share off your blogs. You're doing some fantastic work there, buddy. So, and thank you for joining me tonight. Thanks for giving up your time, James. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you.
Catch you soon.